Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a long minute since I last posted. My last video was my engagement video that I had put together, and a lot's been happening since then. A lot of emotional things. So this video is a life update video. As you can see by the title, I did post a poll the other day. It was a few days ago on my Instagram and my Facebook, and I had asked everyone if they wanted a life update, and I was actually very surprised with how much people who put yes they did, or like just in general I was very surprised how much people answered that. So thank you guys. I think I deserve, or I think you guys deserve to know what's been going on with me, just because you guys are my very loyal subscribers and I love making YouTube for you guys. So without further ado, let's get started. I was going to film this weekend, but I just haven't really found the right time. I honestly wanted to say that I've been putting this video off to the side for a while, but it's a good time right now. I just came home from the gym. Tyler just left to go to boxing, so I just felt like I was in the filming mood. But I'm just gonna start with November of last year. Okay, so last November, I want to say it was probably like the last couple of weeks of November, I was asked by someone in my leadership if I wanted to deploy. I was actually very nervous, guys, because out of all of my years in the military, like I've never been, you know, tasked with a deployment, and like of all the times, like of all your years in your military career, like you don't ever like expect that. Like I know you're in the military, you know, that's what we do, but I just never thought that it would have happened within my first enlistment. So at that point, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know for how long. I didn't know, you know, what country I was going to. So a lot of things was in the air. I only had a few hours to give my leadership an answer. So they had told me before lunch, and I was very mixed with emotions because I was just like, man, I don't even know, like, I don't even know if I want to do this, you know? It's scary, like just saying yes and then potentially finding out that you're going somewhere like dangerous or going somewhere vacation, like a vacation spot or whatever. It's scary. Just the unknown is scary. So I went home. Of course I cried. I don't know why I was crying. I think I was just really nervous. And I'm like, because if I don't go, then I could be potentially missing out on a really good experience, you know? And I wasn't going as my job. I wasn't going as medical. I was going as an OCN duty, which was like other country national. So you just kind of watch contractors from that country work on the base. So you just kind of like supervise them, watch them. So I went home and I spoke it over with Tyler. And mind you guys, like that month, in the month of November, we had prayed so hard for better finances. And I'm like, man, like this could really help us financially, right? And Tyler was on board. He was like, babe, like we'll be fine. Me and the boys will be fine. Like you go and you make that money for the 6 months that you're there. Like this is a good time. So I was like, okay. Came back from lunch that day and I told my leadership, I was like, yeah, I'll go. So I was at the point where I was really missing home, guys. I haven't been home for a year and a half, and I know some of you have watched that video. I went home to surprise my family. So a few days, so I booked my flight, right? I booked my flight because I'm like, babe, I miss home so much. I feel like if I do go on this deployment, then I'm just gonna go home right now, so I can see my family before, I can see everyone before, you know, I deploy. And I wanted to go on the perfect timing where I could go and then come back to spend Christmas and New Year's with Tyler and the dogs, just because Tyler was still training for Golden Gloves. Tyler didn't want to break his cycle of Golden Gloves because he was training, and then of course, you know, with COVID and everything going on, we would have to like quarantine when we came back. So he didn't want to go through all of that, which it was totally understandable. So he's like, babe, you just go home and you see everyone. Don't worry about anything here. So a few days before I left to Hawaii, I ended up getting a phone call, and my leadership was like, hey, you got picked up for the deployment. You're going to leave in March, middle of March, and you're going to, I can't say it, but my leadership was saying that a lot of people was volunteering for this specific deployment. So it was kind of like a blessing, you know, it was a blessing that I got chosen. So I was like, babe, got picked up for the deployment, like I'll be going in March. And then that was that. So I'm like, it's a good thing that I'm going home in December. My trip was only going to be like 10 days to go home. So I was at home for a good week, and maybe not even, maybe like a few days. And I would remember that I was at the swap meet. And for people who don't know what that is, it's a trader's market, which you guys call it in the mainland. So I'm there, and I didn't really have a lot of service on my phone. And I'm walking around, I'm actually paying for something, and Tyler is FaceTiming me like a few times. And I was declining it because I was paying, and I was like, hey babe, like my service is not that good anyways, so just text me. And he said, he's like, babe, answer. He's like, my dad has cancer. So this is why I was holding off on this video, guys. Like, it's hard, like, to just think about it and then to actually say it. It's hard. So I was like, okay, like, you know, my family, a lot of people in my family has had cancer. So hearing that is so hard. It's hard. It's so hard because it's just a lot of unknowns, you know, and it's scary. So I called him, and I was just like, okay, like, well, what stage is it, you know, what type of cancer? And he's like, I don't know that much detail yet, but he's at the hospital right now, and, you know, they're doing tests. So it was probably the next day. And we had found out that he had stomach cancer, and he was already at stage 4. So Tyler, you know, not really knowing a lot about things like that, I was just kind of like, okay, well, me coming from my background where I know like medical things, and I'm just like, it's hard to ask him this question, but I'm like, babe, like, you know, did they give him a time frame? Because usually stage 4, they give you a time frame. And he's like, what are you talking about? My dad is at stage 4, like, it's the last stage. I'm like, he's gonna be better after. I'm like, no, babe, like, stage 4 is like the worst stage. He calls his dad and like finds out more details, and we found out that he only had 2 months to live without chemotherapy, and 2 years to live if he went through with the chemotherapy and, you know, everything went well. So a time frame like that is really like not a lot of time. So mind you guys, his dad, his name's Uncle Malala, you know. To me, he's now my father-in-law. So I ended up telling Tyler, I was like, look, babe, like, you have to come home. Like, you have to come home, you have to see him, because you don't know, you just don't know, like, when life will take its course, you know. So Tyler was very stubborn. I don't think he wanted to come home, just because who wants to see their family member you know, like hear that news and see their family member go through something like that, or a loved one. Is just so hard. It was a few days of going back and forth. I'm like, babe, you gotta come home and you have to see him. So he ended up coming home. I ended up booking his flight. He came home and I extended my trip for another week. I messaged my job. I'm like, look, like we just found out that, you know, Tyler's dad has cancer. Like, this is the time frame they're giving us. Like, I really need to just stay here for another week. So, it was probably one of the best weeks I've ever had with his dad. We ended up going around the island and just hanging out every day. I think I've had one of the most deepest, genuine conversations I've ever had with his dad throughout that week. And then when we left, that's when he was gonna start his chemotherapy. So there was hope, you know, there was hope. But his dad was also going through dialysis, so we kind of knew that it was gonna be a lot on his body, but we prayed, you know, we're like, God, just whatever you have in store for him, just please help him get through it. So we came back home, and it was just in time for Christmas and the New Year's. And then come the first week of January, Tyler ended up falling asleep one night and he was just feeling super sick. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope you don't have COVID. So the next day he woke up and he was just feeling so much more worse. So I was just like, okay, babe, just stay home from work, and then I'm gonna call my job and I'm gonna see if we can get you COVID tested. So mind you guys, during this time I have not even started anything for my deployment, started any out processing at all, like, because I had to quarantine when we came back from Hawaii, and then like there was the holidays, and then like the very first week in January he had COVID. So of course I'm his close contact, so I had to stay home. Sure enough, he was positive, and then I was taking care of him, which was crazy because I never got COVID. He was only in quarantine for 10 days, and like they kept me in quarantine because I tested 3 times while I was in quarantine, and I never showed up positive. So they're like, okay, so you just need to be in quarantine for an additional 10 days after his last date in quarantine. So I was in quarantine for a total of like 21 days. And it was maybe like the third to the last day of my quarantine that that he proposed to me. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, should I even post this? Because technically I'm not supposed to leave the house. But it was at nighttime and we were the only ones outside. And then the following week, I came back to work. And that was when, like, that was the first week I finally got to out process for my deployment. And for my military folks, you guys know how stressful it is, like, out processing. It's just a lot of things you guys need to get done. Like, it's medical things. It's doing your wills and your power of attorney, things like that. Your finances, getting all that squared away. Like, it's just so much to take care of. Especially, like, being in a household where you have a family. Like, I had to make sure that Tyler had his name on accounts that needed to be taken care of, like the car and everything, when I was gone. Just a lot of stress. So that was probably like, things were getting canceled, a lot of appointments because a lot of things came up. So fast forward to the first week of February, and Tyler's dad was in and out of the hospital a lot at that point. He was going through dialysis and then chemo, dialysis, chemo. Like, it was every other day that he had chemo, every other day he had dialysis. So it was a lot on his body. On February 2nd, Tyler and I went to the courthouse and we got married. And that was probably like the last day that I seen Tyler smile. So yes, guys, I am married. I'm in the process of changing my last name. Anyways, so February 2nd rolls around, we get married, and then, okay, so it was the following week after we got married, and it was going into the second week of February, and I was shooting at Cadam. And what Cadam is, it's just, you're shooting a rifle. I had to get qualified for my deployment to shoot. And it was that day where I had gotten a text message from Tyler that Uncle Malala only had a few weeks to live. He wasn't able to hold down food, and guys, it was hard because I'm trying to out-process for this deployment. Tyler's home, and I know he's crying. Like, he's just worried about his dad. I'm worried about his dad. Just a lot of things was on my shoulders at that moment. I questioned this deployment a lot. I was like, I really don't want to go now, you know? Because getting news like that, like, how do you even take it? Like, of course, when you find out someone has X amount of time to live, like, there's not enough preparation you can do to when that time comes to be okay. So I failed Cadam that day. I was the only one who didn't qualify. Everyone qualified. Just so much on my mind, and I just was really not focused. I wasn't all there. Then the next day, I actually got a text message, and they were saying, are you guys planning on coming home? Because we don't know if he even has a week left. And guys, that second week of February, that Friday, Tyler had Golden Gloves. So it was just so much going on that it's like so much going on. It was just hard. I kept my job updated. I'm like, hey, like, this is what's going on. This is what's going on right now. I wasn't really at work at all. Like, I was running around for deployment stuff, and then every time I kind of had a chance in between appointments, I would go home and check on Tyler. And then going to sleep that entire week, it was like, man, we had our phones on loud. And every time our phone would buzz in the middle of the night, it was something about Uncle. So it was scary, you know. Then Wednesday night comes around, and Tyler's sister calls him. And she's like, Tyler's saying that Dad might not make it to the weekend. So Thursday comes around, and I just want to let you guys know that Tyler's dad, like, he wanted Tyler. He was so excited for Tyler to do boxing. Like, so I asked Tyler, I was like, babe, what do you want to do? You know, do you want to go home? I know you've been training for this Golden Gloves for like months now. He's like, no, like, my dad's gonna be okay. Like, I'm gonna bring this home to him. So Thursday night, we drive up to San Antonio for Golden Gloves, and it's such an emotional day, guys. And I want to say that Thursday, Thursday was the 11th. We got to San Antonio, and right before we read our Bible, and we prayed, and we put our phones on the charger. And the second I put my phone on the charger, I got a text message from my mom, and She was there. She was just like, Cece, I'm sorry, but Uncle passed. The night right before Tyler's first fight, guys. So, you know, I looked over at him and I'm like, babe, your dad passed. And I knew at that moment that I couldn't cry because I needed to be strong for Tyler. You guys know, like, or if you guys been with a guy who's just super strong mind, like strong-headed, you know, doesn't show emotion, that's Tyler. But when it came to this, it came to his dad, he was like shut out from the world, and he would just cry and cry. And as a wife, like, to see that, what do you do? What do you do? What do you say? You can't say anything, you know? So we woke up the next day and Tyler ended up weighing in for his fight, and I think that was such an emotional day for me because he was just not talking. He wasn't talking to me, and it's just like nothing I could say or do would make him feel better. And I ended up actually crying at his fights because I was just so proud of him. Just so proud that despite everything that he was going through, that everything that was flowing through his mind, like he was still doing this for his dad. So he ended up winning that day on Friday, and then he won Saturday. And then I booked our flight for the following Wednesday. And that's when, okay, so then he won Saturday and we were supposed to make it to the championship on Sunday. Sunday, we go to his weigh-in and the fights was canceled, like it was postponed because of the weather. So that's when Texas was going through that entire like winter storm. And oh my gosh, guys, that week was a mess. So our flight was supposed to be that Wednesday, and we were gonna drive back to Del Rio, and we were gonna get the dog situated, get their for their sitter, and then pack our stuff, you know, and then leave back to San Antonio Tuesday night, and then fly out on Wednesday. But the snow stopped that, so our flights got canceled. Like the airlines canceled our flights, so we weren't even able to make it home. Then I had to rebook it for Saturday. That was the soonest appointment. I mean, the soonest flight out was Saturday, and it was still so stressful because like the weather was crazy. It was literally so bipolar that week. We were out of power. We were out of water. And kind of like out of food. Like our fridge was done, so we didn't really have a lot of canned foods. And now we know, guys, that to just have canned foods available in your cupboards. Gas stations were closed, stores were closed. Thursday rolls around, right? Boom, our car light goes on, and we take it into Toyota. We come back home. Everything's good. I'm like, okay, babe, like, I know it's been one crazy week, but we are finally gonna make it home. Our tire blows out in the snow right as we're pulling up into our driveway. Boom, flat tire, everything. And I'm like, wow, what do we do now? And we're calling Hyundai like, hey, like, we need help. Like, can you guys squeeze us in to do a tire change tomorrow? And they're like, we don't even know how the weather's gonna be because the snow was like 16 inches, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, man, like, I don't know if this is a sign for us not to go home or what it is, but this is crazy. So Friday, it ended up being 50 degrees when we had woken up. So like the snow melted immediately, the ice melted immediately. And then we ended up getting our tire changed. As soon as we got our tire changed, I get a text message from my leadership, and they're like, hey, just to let you guys know, Highway 90 is closed due to the snow. I'm like, that's the only highway leading from Del Rio up to freaking San Antonio. So what do we do? I'm like checking all like the news and everything, and no one's saying that it's still open, like it opened back up. So I'm like, you know what? It's gotta open back up. Like, this is nuts. So I was like, you know what? Let's just chance it. Let's just drive up there. So we drove up Friday night. Thankfully, the roads were open, and then we got to San Antonio. Okay, so we get on the plane. We board the plane, and mind you guys, it's like 5 in the morning, so I'm freaking tired. 6 in the morning. So I close my eyes and I take a nap. Tell me why I wake up an hour later and we're still sitting in the same spot at the airport on the plane. And I'm looking at my connecting flight. I'm like, hello, like it leaves in like an hour and a half. So by this time, everybody on the plane, I guess, was sleeping, and we all like were waking up at the same time, like speaking to the flight attendants, like, hello, ma'am, sir, my connecting flight, like I'm gonna miss my connecting flight. And she's like, I'm sorry, we have to defrost the plane. Guys, it was so crazy. So we ended up leaving, and the pilot, like 10 minutes before we land, he's like, hey guys, for those who already missed their connecting flights to wherever they're going, please let those who have yet to still make it to their flight get off the plane first so that they can make it to their connecting flights. He lands, and boom, everybody's up. I'm like, bro, we have like 10-15 minutes to still get to our gate, right? And Dallas is a huge freaking airport, but they changed the gates so that, because so the ones who had connecting flights was like in that area, like their gates were right there. So I book it off the plane, guys. I'm sprinting. Tyler has the bags, and I'm catching a cramp in my freaking calves. We run to the gate, and the doors are closed. So we missed our connecting flight from Dallas to Hawaii, and I'm like turning around looking for Tyler. I'm like, man, this is crazy. And Tyler was kind of pissed. Like, guys, it was just a crazy week. And then there was like nothing I could do but laugh. And I looked at him and I'm like, there's no one else I would rather go through this stuff with other than you. And we just started laughing. But anyways, we come back home. We made it back home and made it to Uncle Malala's viewing. We were only at home for a week, and then by the time I came back to Texas, guys, no, I'm sorry, so I came back on the 28th, and then I had to return back to work on the 1st, and then I had 2 weeks to out process because I was supposed to leave on the 16th. And when I came back, guys, Tyler was just a whole different person. Like, he would not talk to me. He wouldn't talk to anyone. His family would text him and call him. He wouldn't answer. And all that I'm thinking of is, man, like, he just lost his dad a few weeks ago, and then I'm about to leave in a few more weeks and be gone for 8 months while he's here without any family in Texas. So I was like, let me see if I can do something, if there's options, you know. So the 1st of March, I went to mental health, and for people who aren't military, mental health is just a clinic, literally mental health. Seriously, like the last time I'd ever go there was that day. So I'm speaking with the psychiatrist, and she's kind of treating me like I'm making this stuff up. And basically she tells me, well, try losing somebody when you're actually deployed. That's worse. And then she says, mental health is important, but you could potentially lose your career over this. Or this could potentially affect your career after this if you don't go. And I'm like, so she's like, so what do you need from us? And I'm like, I'm trying to see if I can actually stay home from this deployment is what I'm trying to ask you. Like, she's like, no, there's gonna be severe repercussions regarding you for your career. And I did tell her that I wanted to move back to Hawaii on orders, you know. And she's like, and all that kind of, and you know, your orders and your guard orders to Hawaii can't be taken away from you. But mental health is important. She's like, but I strongly suggest that when you get downrange that you speak to mental health there, you know, go and speak to them every week so that they know what's going on with you. Mind you guys, that day on March 1st, after my appointment with her, I had to go shoot and recertify at CADM because I failed. I'm crying, telling her like what's going on, how I'm feeling. And she's like, do you honestly think that you can go and shoot at CADM after you just told me that? And you're like crying and you're in this mental state right now? I'm like, do you think that I can go and deploy like when I'm going through all this stuff right now? I can't go shoot, but I can go and deploy for 8 months. She's like, I'm gonna give you mental health quarters. You come back tomorrow and you let me know what you want to do. But just want to let you know to keep that in mind that, you know, your career could be affected. So I felt so stuck, guys. And to be completely like transparent, like I felt like I didn't have anybody because I knew I had to be there for Tyler, and Tyler was just not in the right state of mind to be hearing like a lot of the things that I was feeling. And I didn't want to be selfish, you know, and like I didn't want to be selfish. I just knew I had to be there for him. And I was holding a lot of things in and a lot of feelings in. I just felt super lonely. Like, if he's already not talking to me now, you know, I'm gone for 8 months. The time difference is like 13, 14 hours. We're not going to be talking at all. Like, it's going to be hard. And then he's the type that if people are calling him and checking in on him, he's not going to answer. So I'm like, what do I do? So I ended up speaking to my coworkers. They're airmen. And they're like, go speak to, you know, our leadership. Speak to our leadership. Let them know what's going on. She's like, don't take no for an answer. So I did. And thankfully, guys, that my leadership was completely understanding. And they were already kept in the loop from the beginning back in December when we had found out that his dad had cancer. So they had me replaced with someone else, and they said, you take care of your family and you take care of your husband and everything's gonna be okay. And if you need anything, you let us know. So that actually restored my faith in the military, let me tell you guys. But never again will I go back to mental health. Tyler lost the championship for Golden Gloves. They postponed it to the 13th. He lost, but like I was telling him, like, the fact that you even still did Golden Gloves the day after your dad passed, like, you already won, you know? Like, you already won. And here we are, a couple of weeks later. And I'm home. I'm not going on the deployment anymore. Me and Tyler are working through some things for our future. But I did get a new truck this past weekend because our car was dying out on us. So I did get a new truck. And now, guys, me and Tyler are just taking things day by day. There's so many moments that I catch him, you know, just really down. And I kind of just give him his space, just hug him and kiss him, let him know that I love him. He's still, you see pain through his eyes every single day, and that kills me, honestly. But at least I'm here with him. And like I was telling my family, like, deployments, they come and go, you know, money is not everything. They raised me to take care of my family, and that money is not everything in this world. So I just wanted to make this video, guys, so that I can go forward and make my videos now. There was a long break between my, you know, back in January to now, so I felt like you, as my true subscribers, really deserve to hear all of that stuff. And now I can make videos. Uncle Malala was probably my #1 supporter when it came to YouTube. He would always ask me when I was gonna post, and he would always rewatch my videos. And I was actually thinking of stopping YouTube because for a while, but Tyler was just like, my dad loved when you did YouTube, and I'm like, you know what, and I love doing it too, so I'm gonna keep doing it. So guys, I think you guys see a lot of funny content of me and a lot of my goofy side. Never did I think that this side was gonna come out anytime soon. I just want to thank you guys so much for being patient with me and following me along with this journey, guys. I know I've been really MIA, but I am going to try and give out more content, and things can only go up from here. So I just want to say that I love you guys so much, and stay tuned for my next video.